All right, who decides when we start? Do I decide? Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Steve Lindy, the editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Post, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here today to what I think will be one of the most interesting and important panel discussions at this Facing Tomorrow Israeli Presidential Conference, the challenge of being Jewish in the diaspora. Please join me in welcoming our special guests in the panel who have flown in from all over the world. I feel like this is like introducing the Euro 2012 competition. From Italy, we have Emanuela Fiano, a member of the Italian Chambers of Deputies for the Democratic Party of Italy, the Interior Affairs and Defense Portfolio holder, Democratic Party of Italy, the former president of the Jewish community of Milan, former member of the National Board, the Union of Jewish Communities in Italy, and a former contract professor at the Polytechnic University of Milan. Welcome to you. Next, we have Mr. Malcolm Honline from the United States of America, the Executive Vice Chairman of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations, the founding Chairman of America's Voices in Israel, the Co-Chair of Secure Community Network, the founding Executive Director of the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater New York, and the Greater New York Conference on Soviet Jewry. Welcome, Malcolm. And also from America, for some reason we have two Americans on the panel today, Rabbi Richard Rick Jacobs, President of the Union for Reform Judaism, Rabbi Emeritus, Westchester Reform Temple, the Brooklyn Heights Synagogue, a Senior Rabbinic Fellow, the Shalom Hartman Institute, former Secretary of the Central Conference of American Rabbis, board member of the UJA Federation of New York, American Jewish World Service, and a recipient of America's Top 50 Rabbis for 2012, the Daily Beast and Newsweek. Also Forward 50, the Jewish Daily Forward, Doctor of Divinity at the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion, which is based here in Jerusalem.
Wow.
I'm sorry I'm leaving the ladies for last, but certainly not least. Mr. That was a Freudian slip, there we go.
I hope so.
My first. Mrs. Rachel Corpus came all the way from New Zealand. She is president of the Zionist Federation of New Zealand. She runs the, do you say Z or Z in New Zealand?
Whatever makes you happy.
Okay, in South Africa we say Z. The ZFNZ on a voluntary basis and is in her fourth term as president. Under her presidency, the Federation has grown to be the largest informal education provider for the New Zealand Jewish community. Rachel graduated from Auckland University with a BA in Organizational Management and Sociology. Professionally, she has had an extensive 20-year career in retail management, and she and her husband currently own and operate 17 retail stores throughout New Zealand. Finally, and I apologize if I get the pronunciation wrong, Professor Judith Boxer-Liverant came all the way from Mexico. Professor, head of the Graduate School in Political and Social Sciences, the National Autonomous University of Mexico, a National Research Fellow, the National Council of Science and Technology, and the author, among others, of the Jewish Identities in an Era of Globalization and Multiculturalism, Thinking Globalization, Democracy, and Diversity. She is also a member of Mexico's prestigious Academy of Sciences. Welcome to you, Professor Liverant. As you can hear from my accent, I'm an immigrant from South Africa originally, which once had double the number of its current 60,000 Jews. This morning, I spoke to the Chief Rabbi, Warren Goldstein, who told me they've just had a very successful Sinai Indaba, or roundtable dialogue, among personalities across the Orthodox Jewish spectrum, including Rabbi Israel Meir Lau here from Israel. But it is no secret that South Africa has somewhat of a crime problem, and just this week I heard the following story. A man saw a sticker on a car in Jerusalem that read, "I love Israel, but I really miss South Africa." So he smashed the window, stole the car radio, and left a note saying, "I hope this helps." I tell the story because although some people tend to glorify aspects of Jewish life in the diaspora, there is often an ugly side that we, the media, are criticized for playing up. And here I'm not talking necessarily about crime in South Africa, but rather a pervasive, all too prevalent anti-Israel atmosphere, which we now like to term delegitimization, but it is often a guise for politically correct anti-Semitism. The threats to Jewish existence in the diaspora are numerous and diverse, including assimilation, the weakening of Jewish identity, financial difficulties in maintaining communal and educational institutions, and of course, the dangers of terrorism and violence, growing anti-Semitism, and the delegitimization of Israel. Despite these threats, many communities across the globe are flourishing, new Jewish organizations are being established, and Jewish creativity is prospering. But other communities are struggling, religiously, culturally, and financially. How can we ensure the healthy continuity of Jewish existence in the diaspora? And does Israel have a role to play in this process? These are the questions we are going to focus on today, and I'll address a question to each of our panelists first, then we'll open it up to discussion, and finally we'll take some questions from the audience. So I'll first turn to you, Malcolm Honline, if we can begin with you as leader of the largest and most powerful Jewish community in the world, outside of Israel, of course. How do you see the future of American Jewry, and more specifically, what do you see as the primary dangers and challenges that lie ahead?
Is that part one, or that's the whole question? This is, it's obviously a very difficult and complex question, and one that we think about all the time. But, Jews, when we look to the future, we first look to the past, because if we're not rooted in our past, we're not going to be able to meet the challenges of the future. And this is really unique to Judaism, and the way we approach history is experience history. And, Winston Churchill once said, the further back you look, the further ahead you will see. Our sages said it 1,000 years earlier. So looking to the future means that we have to look at where we are, where we came from, how we got here, and how do we come to a different conclusion. For me, it's not a question of survival. The question is thriving. How do we have thriving Jewish communities under the circumstances that obtain? The world is shrinking. The Jewish world is shrinking even more. And it's not just in terms of numbers. Globalization has made the world a much smaller place. It means everything is integrated. All problems, all issues are interrelated, domestic and international, and certainly between international issues. When I came to New York to start the Soviet Jewry organization, it was a big issue to deal with the Soviet Empire. But you didn't have to think of the ramifications in Malaysia, Indonesia. Today you have to look at all the ramifications, the economic interrelationships, the political interrelationships, which makes the issues much more complex for us. And therefore, many people want to avoid them because it all looks so difficult and so overwhelming. And the truth is today we face issues of great complexity, but also great seriousness. The Jews were the first global people. Benjamin Metudela, long before Marco Polo, went around the world, and we have whole industries, the diamond industry, other things that grew up because of the interrelationship of Jews as a global nation, as a people with connections. And we consider all the four corners of the world and all our prayers as coming together because Jews are a people, the international Jewish community, which some people then misinterpret as a conspiracy because they don't understand why we feel what we feel for Jews very distant when they don't have comparable sentiments. So I think the situation first is that we have to focus our resources and to look at the issues realistically. There are contradictory trends. I won't go into all of it now. But diaspora life is by and large good, certainly in the United States, which means that assimilation is easier, intermarriage, a lot of the problems that we face are because life is better. The barriers came down, and also Jews can opt out. And it means also opting out in terms of a concern with the issues. The biggest problem we face is indifference. Moshe Rabbeinu taught us in the mitzvah of Hakel that the greatest danger to the Jewish people is not external enemies or natural disasters. It's apathy, indifference, and ignorance. Those are the things that we could not overcome. And we see increasingly the indifference towards Israel, towards other issues. It's not antagonism. It's not what some people have been writing about the young people being against Israel. It is not true. We've done very extensive studies, the biggest study ever done of the American people, every segment, Jews and non-Jews, blacks, Hispanics, Asians, young, old. And what we found is that properly presented, Israel gains support. People want to be supportive of Israel. And if you ask them in a poll, 2/3 say they do, unlike many of the other countries that you come from and know about. Jewish demography is also a challenge. We have fewer babies. We have an older population, disproportionately old population, which means that more of the resources of our community are going to be focused meeting the needs of the elderly old rather than on the young and meeting the educational needs. Because a simple answer, and taught throughout Jewish history, is education. It's why Judaism made it the first priority, that even before a synagogue, you have to build a school, and the collective responsibility for educations of communities towards every student, even where the parents don't provide it, you have a collective responsibility to provide it. When the Greeks and the Romans limited it to the elites, Judaism said it has to be universal. So we know that what the answer is. The question is the nature of the Jewish education, how we reach the young people. The changing demographies also of the countries in which we live will impact all of us. You know, we have in America, 40% of the births are Hispanic children. In Europe, you know that 40% are Muslim children. These are all going to have sociological impacts. We're living in a vastly changing world. But the Catholic Church had it right when they said, give us the child till he's 6, you can have him the rest of their lives. We do not. We take our children for granted. We do not educate them. We send them on birthright at 18, but ignore them the first 18 years of their lives and expect Israel to save them. Israel does do a good job. It does open their eyes. But then they go to a campus unprepared and fall victim to the trends. And it brings me to the issue which I think is really the key, and you raised, Stephen, and that is delegitimization. Nobody knows what it means. Israelis cannot pronounce it. So we have to come up with a different term than delegitimization. But we know its impact. It is a global phenomenon. It impacts every sector of society, unions, churches, academic, cultural, every sector. It is not about policies. It's not about where the border should be or settlements. This is not about 67. It's about 47. It's about Israel's right to exist. But it's not just about Israel. It's about the Jewish people. And it's about the Jewish people's right, but it's not politically correct to say I hate Jews. In most places, some it is. But you can't say I hate Israel, and certainly that I hate Zionists. And we failed this generation because we let Zionism become a pejorative term. That should not be tolerated and has to be turned around. I know we have limited time, so I just want to raise a few points. The truth about delegitimization is it's our fault. We raise the bar on what we tolerate. We have to draw the line and say, no more. We're not going to allow Israel to be presented with the lies and distortions and misrepresentations that is so common in the press and that we see increasingly evidenced. Martin Luther King once said, we won't be judged by the attacks of our enemies, but by the silence of our friends. We are our friends. We are the friends of Israel, and we in the diaspora have to stand up. And we have created all sorts of new mechanisms. We have here today groups from Africa, leading the central bankers of Africa. We have movie stars. We are bringing people all the time to address those audiences, to turn around the image. When the study shows that if you give people the truth about Israel, Israel's strongest weapon is the truth. And you can take them to see anything you want. They all go back and saying, this is not the country I expected. And young Jews have to be told because they're being fed the lies as well. But when they hear a black movie actor tell them, guys, you don't know what Israel really is, it turns them around. And we have to learn to go to them and to do stuff. You know, you have Al Jazeera, Al Manar, Al Hura, pounding the minds of young Jews. But we don't have no Al Shapiro going there and telling them, hey, this is the real truth, what's going on. And it's time that we start getting into the 21st century, that we have to use the new methodology. Everybody accuses us of controlling the media. Why shouldn't we do it? The truth is that young Jews are intimidated. Older Jews are intimidated. On many campuses, we hear that young Jews don't sign in on their religion, don't want to sign up for Judaic studies. Christian students are not intimidated. Jewish students are. And they are afraid to stand up. And when they have to pass through checkpoints on the campuses, of their campuses, it becomes very difficult. So we have to tell Israel's story in the diaspora. It is not the total solution. We have to build strong communities. We have to build the infrastructure of communities. But Israel today is a partner with us in this. It's no more the patronizing, look what we did for Israel in the 50s and 60s. It's what Israel is doing for us. It's saving our children. And we have to today give them an understanding and build common approaches, because the problems are universal. And that means Europe, the United States, Israel together have to globalize the solution to global problems. Certainly there's a difference in degree, but not in the challenge. To me, we were able to anticipate delegitimization because I looked at the British example. That was the model for America, and we were ahead of it because we learned from them and about the nature of the problem. We have to fight 21st century challenges, 21st century wars with 21st century weapons. We have to try and challenge and meet the challenges of the Jewish people utilizing the 21st century's innovations and solutions.
Thank you, Malcolm. You're always so very eloquent that it's hard to cut you off, but we do want to give the panelists a chance to speak, and then we'll open it up for discussion. So from the large to the small, Rachel Corpus, you are the leader of one of the smallest Jewish communities struggling in the world. Maybe struggling is too harsh a word, but tell us about your community.
Thank you, Steve. First of all, I acknowledge my wonderful members on the panel here, and it's an honour to be amongst you. Just a little personal introduction. As I said, my name is Rachel. I'm 38 years old. I am a mother with 2 children, and in my public life, I run a business. In my private life, I run a non-profit organisation called the Zionist Federation of New Zealand, and I'm a product of a great Zionist youth movement called Hub and Draw. I've been on the executive for 10 years of the Zionist Federation, and I've been the president for 4 years. And I think I can claim I'm the youngest president ever in this role. So I bring something new to the table.
Just move a little bit away from the microphone.
Like that?
Yeah.
Okay. First, before I go into the details of the challenges of living in the diaspora in a remote community, I really wanted to take the chance on behalf of the New Zealand community to thank the State of Israel, the World Zionist Organisation, the Jewish Agency, for the support given to the New Zealand community. Your support in the past and continued support in the future has been a defining factor of Jewish continuity in New Zealand. So thank you, Israel. New Zealand is a nation of pioneers. During the early 1800s, many of British immigrants came with nothing to a land that was empty and full of wild bush. Whatever they could carry is what they had to start a life in a new country. With the pioneering spirit still exists today. There is a concept called the number 8 wire concept for New Zealanders, and for the New Zealanders in the room, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Number 8 wire is used to build anything and fix everything. And I believe the same creative spirit exists here in Israel, to build a country piece by piece out of nothing or out of number 8 wire. And that is what we continue to do in our New Zealand community. We're fortunate to live in a country founded on democratic and egalitarian principles. In fact, New Zealand was the first country in the world to give women the vote. But looking towards the Jewish community, or my community, it is not a new community. We are over 6 generations in New Zealand, and the first families arrived in the first wave of immigrants in the early 18th century. Zionist activity has been alive and kicking for over 100 years in New Zealand. Recently, I found a document of receipts of a donation that members of the early Jewish community sent to the JNF in 1911 for £7.5, sent to the Kaikal for their mission. So our history is long and strong, and we're very proud of it. But let's fast forward. The population is between 10 to 15,000 Jews spread over 2 islands. The largest is in Auckland, which is the city that I live in. There are 2 Jewish day schools or elementary schools, and there are no Jewish high schools. And this is a challenge that I hope that I will be able to explore later in our discussion. And there are 2 strong, active, very proud and active Zionist youth movements. And many of the graduates of those youth movements have made Aliyah, and some of them are in the room today. We have progressive and orthodox shuls in Auckland, Wellington and in the South Island. And as I hope some of you know, the South Island, after the massive Christchurch earthquake, is a very special story for us now, and I also hope that I get to share some of that story later in the panel. We are small, yet we are strong. We are remote, which makes us very creative. The young leads the old, because we have no choice. There are many challenges to live in the diaspora. But first, I really want to unpack the word diaspora. The diaspora for me, for my community, is a loaded word. My diaspora, my New Zealand diaspora, is not the diaspora of my mates in Sydney or Melbourne, or perhaps the people around me in this panel. So yes, we are all labelled as Jews living in the diaspora, but our experiences and challenges are different and diverse. As an introduction, I want to share with you, from my experience as the leader of a Jewish community in the diaspora, 3 main points that I would like to focus on today. First of all, our remoteness. My friends, the next step after New Zealand is Antarctica. We live very, very far away. It takes 2.5 days to get here, and you wake up 2.5 days later. So when you talk about remoteness, I get it. Our isolation brings a whole set of challenges that I could talk at length on, and that is a very, very key point, and that's why I put it first. Our size is a challenge and sometimes a double-edged sword. On a good day, we are 15,000 Jews plus Israelis. And the Israeli population is growing. And that is a whole discussion in itself. We have no critical mass, which, by the way, does not make us any less critical in the Jewish world. However, it is challenging to find a Jewish voice locally, outside of our community, within the government space, within general community space, and also internationally. So our size is our second biggest challenge. Third, creating sustainable and effective leadership to maintain Jewish identity and continuity for our community. In other words, the birds like to leave the nest. And it is such a huge challenge to maintain the Jewish leadership in the community, because that is our future. That is what will keep us alive. That is the future of our Jewish continuity. And we're doing some really creative, amazing projects to invest in that leadership. And I also hope I get the chance to share that with you today. So in summary, what I bring to this table is real experience at what I call the coalface of the most remote community, and we work extremely hard. Everyone is a volunteer. I'm a volunteer. Every Jew in this room who's from New Zealand, who I love, I know deeply and personally, is a volunteer. No one is paid to work in our community. So the work we do comes from a very special, deep place. And I also hope that I get to share more of that with you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you, Rachel, for those words from the heart. Emanuele Fiano, the Italian Jewish community is one of the oldest and most established in the world. How is it faring in the face of the current economic crisis in Europe, and how do you see the future of Italian Jewry?
Thank you. We are about 30,000 Jews in Italy, maybe something less. But as we are Italians, also not only Jews, we are allowed to say we are 50,000, 60,000. And maybe this is to justify we have so many Italian Jewish kosher restaurants in Rome and Milano and in Florence. We have many. But the Italian people who are not Jews think that we are 1 million, and we let them think about this. In my own community, the Jewish community in Milan, in which I was the president many years ago, we are about 7,000. And 16,000 in Rome, which is the oldest Jewish community abroad in the diaspora, and some other thousands of Jews in Florence, in Turin, in Venice, in Bologna, and some other places. But I must also say that while I was in the school age, we were 1,000 in the Jewish school in Milan. Now we are 500. So the number of Jews in Italy, maybe except from Rome, it's dramatically decreasing. So for us, maybe the question could be not, for many of our communities, not which kind of future will be for us, as it can be how long will be our future in the Jewish communities in Italy. I must say that one of the most important points that I want to speak with you about our future, about the future of the Jewish diaspora, at least of the little Jewish diasporas, not of the Americans one maybe, is the question of the identity and education. Let me say I am the son of an Auschwitz survivor. I never know anyone from my father's family. All of them were murdered in Auschwitz, in Birkenau. And the family of my father was almost assimilated. The family of my mother was much more involved in the synagogue and in the Jewish life. We are 3 brothers. They had 3 children. My oldest brother lives in Milan. His oldest son lives in Tel Aviv. His daughter lives in Amsterdam. His youngest daughter lives in Milan. My second brother lives in New York, and his daughter lives in New York too. And I have 2 children. They are in Milan. They did study in the Jewish school. They belong to a Jewish youth movement, Shomer HaTzair. Also in a Jewish family, we do practice many kinds of way of being Jewish. So I think that the most important point for us is to struggle for a common, open Jewish vision for our communities. Open vision for our communities. Let's open all the doors of our communities in the diaspora for any kind of Jew we know. I don't think there is one kind of Jew that can judge, can say if someone else, some other Jew, is more or less Jew than him. And I think that we have in the diaspora at least in the Italian diaspora, as I know, many invisible Jews. Jews that they are not in the age of the school, that they don't have children in the school age, that they don't have parents in the elderly house age. They feel they are Jews, but they are invisible for most of the Jewish institutions. We have to reach them. We need an inclusive vision for our communities, to include people, not to exclude people, all the Jews that want to belong to the Jewish people, because we are more than the number that we can count in our institutions. And I think this is the second point, that we have to work hardly for a new Jewish leadership. And I think that a new Jewish leadership, a new young leadership, will succeed, will fulfill the goal of continuity of Judaism if this leadership will, if we will succeed in reaching all these invisible Jews. These two goals, the goal of an open vision of our identity and the goal of building up a new leadership, are two main goals to fulfill the duty of the continuity of Judaism abroad in the diaspora. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those important words, and I'd like to elaborate on them a bit later in the discussion. But let me turn to you, Professor Judith Liverant. The image of Mexican Jews is one of a wealthy, well-established community that has good ties with the government in Israel. Is this a stereotypical description? Is the community really prospering? How do you see the future of Mexico's Jews?
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Steve, because when you organized this session, you posed before us some very interesting questions, challenges, and how we see it. But let me start sharing with you a feeling that I'm having all these last 2 days. Do you remember The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, right? The הנשיא הקטן. Okay, there, the Little Prince says that adult people, usually what they want is facts and numbers. They have a very quantitative approach to life. Usually, when you meet another adult person, he asks you, where do you live? How old are you? But now, what I feel is that the first question is, how many Jews are in Mexico? How many Jews are in Italy? So either demography became really, which I think a very, very challenging problem, or our friends, the demographers, have made the cause of it. Now,
you better tell us how many Jews there are in Mexico.
well, I'll start saying, let me address, and yes, I will tell. You already asked me, Steve. I will tell, but I will tell this, and I will go to numbers, right? When you ask today how many Jews are in Mexico or how many Jews are in Latin America, you have to look with a new perspective. In Latin America today, there are close to 400,000 people, Jewish people living, right? 400,000. The same amount are living abroad. So either you approach it as diminishing Jewish communities, or you approach it, what I suggest, from another perspective. What does it mean, relocation of Jewish life abroad? Mainly in the United States and in Israel? And what does it mean, this new interconnectedness of Jewish life, of global life, of contemporary life? So therefore, I would say, in Mexico, we have around 35, 40,000 Jews living. As in Italy, people think we are 1 million, of course. In Latin America, people think that millions of Jews live, and you have an explanation for that. Where Jews and Jewish communities are located, socially, culturally, economically, first. Second, which is very important, the density, the organized institutional density of Jewish life. Take, for example, Mexico, right? Over there, when Jewish immigration arrived, as other foreign immigrations, European, there one school was founded, right? There was the German school, there was the French school, the Lycée, there was the Jewish school. Today, at the beginning of the 21st century, you have a French lycée, you have a German school, and you have 17 Jewish institution, educational institution, day schools. This is a kind of inner creativity, of inner force, of institutional density, I would say, that of course has a very, very important impact on societies at all. Now, what I started, and I refer to this transnational look, because today, when I refer to 400,000, close to 400,000 Jews living abroad, I refer of Latin American Jews in Israel, but also in the United States. And over there, I would add something that Malcolm referred, which is that today in the United States, there are 50 million of people belonging to the Latino/Hispanic/Latin American Jewish community, right? Forget Jewish, Latin American communities. So then, of course, I have news for you. Originally Jews, right. So then, what I want to say,
$10 to each one.
what I want to say is that we are living in Jewish diaspora has always been global. Today is global and transnational, meaning by that the movements keep on going. Migration is not now only an individual decision, but migration influences the societies of origin and the societies of destination. So in this transnational world, I would suggest to look, first of all, the role and place of Israel, which has been always essential, central, and fundamental for Jewish Latin American life, today is going through very important redefinitions, which means there are new centers, and we have to imagine how we build a Jewish life where different centers interact. Then secondly, I want to refer also that from the perspective of Latin American Jews, there is something I want to share with you also as a surprise. You all know what has been the crisis, the economical crisis and political crisis that have gone through the different countries in Latin America, especially the southern cone, right? Argentina, Chile, Brazil, etc. Recently was released the study of the New York community, and over there, among the data that Steve Cohen shared with us this week, is that poverty is increasing. A few weeks ago was released the last study, Jewish poverty, was released the study by the Joint, right, in Europe, all the study of all the European countries. And over there, among the priorities that were defined was poverty and inequality. Of course, Latin America, the southern part, as you know, has gone through. So I do think that today globalization has brought the Jewish world in what I would say convergences, social convergences, economic convergences, and of course, cultural some values. Having said so, let me approach final two comments. First of all, I do think that diversity and plurality is part of our Jewish world, and we have to face it. Identities are diverse, and there are divides and there are separations, and there are different axes around the Jewish world might be seen both as powerful and also as vulnerable in the diaspora and in Israel. So if we can think in global terms, the way we really benefit from this past and present interaction, we can really approach, I would say, with much more resources, intellectual resources, of course, different resources, some of the main challenges that we are facing.
Thank you so much. And I do want to broaden it to look at the global picture in our discussion. Rabbi Rick Jacobs, I've purposely left you to last because I think you can provide us with a unique perspective on the subject, and from then we can go on to a dialogue among the panelists.
Thank you. A strong case, I believe, can be made presently. It's easier to be Jewish in the diaspora than it is to be a non-Orthodox Jew in the state of Israel. Now, the title of this panel, it rehearses the decades-old narrative of Jewish life in the Tfutsoot, in the diaspora. Yes, there are places on this earth where Jews have to hide their identities and their activities, but thankfully, that is not the experience of the great majority of Jews in North America. In 1964, Look magazine ran a cover story entitled "The Vanishing American Jew," which predicted by the year 2000 the Jewish people would be fading from sight. Well, almost 50 years later, look at the Jewish people, and I dare you to find Look magazine. They went out of business long ago, and we're still very much here. And what an extraordinary blessing it is that we can gather with pride and with strength here in Medinat Yisrael. But please do not think that we in the largest diaspora Jewish community dwell in perpetual fear and uncertainty. Yes, we have some challenges to overcome. So what's new? Ties that once bound Jews to each other and to our tradition are fraying. Technology has changed the very way in which we access Jewish knowledge and experience community. A 1957 survey of North Americans found that 3% described themselves as having no religious affiliation at all. By 2008, that number grew to 17%. But among young Jews in their 20s and 30s and across all religious lines, that number of those without any religious affiliation grows to at most 40 and even beyond 40%. There are new realities in Jewish life. There are new realities in North American life in general. But lamrot hakol, in spite of it all, I'm pleased to say to each of you that we in the North American Reformed Jewish community are responding creatively and effectively to the new realities in Jewish life. Now today, less than 50% of American Jews are members of synagogues. The fastest growing group in Jewish life is the group we call the unaffiliated. I don't like the term. Unaffiliated means it's their fault. I prefer to use the term uninspired, which means it's our fault. Our job is to inspire and help them find their place within Jewish life. Now, the Reform movement is very committed to reaching and engaging the uninspired by reaching beyond the walls of synagogues, to meet people where they are and not wait for them to come to us. For this next era in life, in Jewish life in particular, the Reform movement is catalyzing congregational change, creating a compelling presence in digital media, on the college campus, across town, and all over the world. Why? So that all who are hungry for inspiring spirituality, passionate prayer, probing study, and social justice can find their way to us. Ours is the Judaism of autonomy, inclusiveness, creativity, passion, relevance, and yes, depth. We, I believe, are the Judaism for a new era. Now, for too long, the Jewish community had no place for interfaith families and LGBT Jews. Reformed Judaism lovingly embraces all who have been previously kept out of Jewish life. And what has happened? In so doing, we have grown in size and in strength. We are the largest movement in Jewish life, 1.5 million people. Now, 2 weeks ago, I was in Cincinnati, Ohio, for the ordination of our new rabbis, it was a chance for us to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the ordination of the first woman rabbi, Rabbi Sally Priesand. Now, Sally literally broke through a barrier, forging a path that many, many have followed. Judaism was never meant to be frozen. Reformed Judaism is not afraid of change. Since Isaiah and Amos, the Jewish tradition has been serious about social justice. Ritual is powerful, but it is not a substitute for creating a society that cares for the stranger, even when those strangers come from the heart of Africa. The commandment to love the stranger doesn't specify how that stranger came to live amongst us. Our sacred mission, and I speak of our Reform movement, is to strengthen our place among Am Yisrael, the people of Israel. We are responsible for everyone within our people. No matter what their practice of Judaism might be, no matter where they call home, our circle of responsibility includes those we may not know by name, those who think, earn, believe, and vote differently than we do. Jewish life is not about organizations or fundraising or buildings. It's not about survival for survival's sake. It's about living a life of depth, purpose, and character. That's what our young people are looking for. It's just that most of them have given up looking to the institutional Jewish world to find that core of who they want to be. Now, taking responsibility for others lifts us out of that indulgence and narrowness of self and connects us to a world of meaning. Rebuilding broken lives in the developing world is surely a part of our sacred calling, as is caring for Jewish elders in Brighton Beach, Brooklyn, or Ethiopian Jewish children living in Beersheba amid rocket fire from Gaza. On our North American movement's front, we are forging ever deeper ties with the state of Israel. Now, let it be said loudly that the state of Israel is nothing short of a miracle. Israel's filled with more natural beauty, scientific know-how, and love for life than just about any other place on God's earth. There are plenty of challenges here. I think we know about those. But when it comes to hope, there is no place like Israel. Israel needs us to stand up for her in a world that rarely gives her a chance. Guarding Israel's security is our sacred responsibility, but Israel also needs us to make sure that the values we hold dear, equality, tolerance, pluralism, democracy, are understood and protected. Just weeks ago, our movement won a great victory. For all non-Orthodox Jews, I believe for all our people, when the Israeli government finally agreed to pay Rabbi Miri Gold for her service to her community. That didn't happen overnight. It was the result of years of petitions and legal battles to win this historic decision. And we still got a long way to go to make sure that Israel protects and supports all expressions of Judaism. And before the establishment of the Jewish state, and with this I'll conclude, David Ben-Gurion sought the wise counsel of a trusted colleague, Yitzhak Tebenkin, in making a very critical decision. Tebenkin said, I need a day to consider this crucial decision. At the appointed time, he gave Ben-Gurion his answer. And Ben-Gurion said, I accept your answer, but why did you need a day? Who did you consult with so that you could make this decision? Tebenkin said, I consulted with two people, with my grandfather who died 10 years ago, and with my grandson who is not yet born. As we reimagine Jewish life, we must look both to the past, but very, very intently on the future. We have a phenomenal opportunity to revitalize Jewish life. Rarely in Jewish history have we known an era of so much creativity or innovation. and no previous generation has possessed our resources and our potential, I firmly believe that the best is yet to come.
Thanks for that optimistic ending. I'd like to open it up to panel discussion, but let me play devil's advocate with you, Rabbi Jacobs. According to the same survey that Professor Liverant cited, it's the Haredim who have provided the biggest increase in the New York population. And is it not Orthodox Judaism that has kept us alive all these years?
First of all, I'll not be lured into a discussion of which are the most legitimate forms. God bless that we have many authentic ways to live Judaism. Ultra-Orthodox is a beautiful expression of authentic Judaism, as is conservative Judaism, Reform Judaism, Reconstructionist Judaism, and the many new forms that are growing, renewal and all the other forms. So let's be careful with that study. Let's not jump to the conclusion. First of all, it is the New York Jewish community that is studied. It is unlike any other Jewish community other than certain parts of Israel. And when you talked about the study showing how the increase in Jewish poor is directly proportional to the increase in ultra-Orthodox Jews in the greater New York area. They are also, by and large, a community that does not support the many communal institutions that care for our community. So it's a very complex study, and I would say that we don't actually know enough details to conclude that we are shrinking on a steady decline. And what I would add, and certainly in response, we have to face, there are real facts, there are real challenges. But the way to face them is actually to think about change. Why are we here at this conference? We're here, I heard Shimon Peres just a few minutes ago talking about change in the most dramatic and compelling ways. That's what the Jewish community is required to do. I believe that's what we are doing. And by doing so, I believe that we are going to change the demographics. And by opening the tent, just as Manuel has said, we are going to make, for many people who have not found a Jewish home that is wonderfully nourishing, inclusive, and very, very committed to the Jewish future.
Rachel?
I think added to that is, instead of looking what divides us, I think we need to look at what brings us together. We have more in common as Jews than we have that separate us. And in my small community, what turned us around in the organisation that I run is we turned that argument on its head. We looked at what we have to share, and we have many, many things between the progressive and Orthodox communities that we need to share together. We have limited resources, so let's put our educators together. We have two amazing Zionist youth movements. Let's train our leaders together. Let's train our young students about Hasbara together. There are things that bring us closer, and we can pray in separate ways. Of course we can do that. That's hugely important, and we need to celebrate, as Rabbi Jacob said, the differences. But we also need to acknowledge that if we're going to move forward as communities, whether they are small and remote like my own, or magnificent and great like yours, if we do not recognise the pieces of the puzzle that we can connect, then how can we move forward as diaspora Jewry? And I think that's hugely important and should be brought to the table.
Yeah, let me add just a perspective from the Latin American case. As we know, throughout the 20th century, Latin American Jewish communities have been able to contribute with one of the most powerful model, I would say, of Jewish corporate experience. Secularized, cohesive Jewish kehilot, ethno-cultural, with Israel as the main center. Clarity of defining boundaries, richness of institutions to which I refer, unmistaken Jewish contents, and acceptance of this life in the context. Now, there is an emerging pattern that crosses all the Jewish world, which is religious revival, if we may say so. There is an emerging pattern that I ask myself, looking from the Latin American perspective, during the 60s, 1960s, the conservative movement came from the north to the south, when Rabbi Marshall Mayer founded the Seminario Rabínico Latinoamericano, which is the equivalent to the JTS, right? Then it came as a proposal of a religious and acquired a communal perspective with all the contents. Then today there is another spread, which is all the Chabad movement and all the Chabad centers. So I want to pose a question. Are we facing the growing role and visibility of the Jewish religion as a manifestation of a cultural revival? Is religion a creative experience? And if such revival of religions directed from local community is directed or is better understood as local communities joining a transnational Jewish communities of believers. Some have their authorities in the United States, some in Israel. I look at Chabad Center spreading and all this movement, the Lubavitcher Rebbe or Rav Ovadia Yosef, etc. These are new patterns of a global Jewish world that, of course, are paralleling what you presented to us.
Malcolm Honline, what role does Israel have in all of this? In strengthening Jewish communities across the diaspora?
I think Israel is central to everything in Jewish life. I don't think anybody can imagine life in the diaspora without Israel today. I think that, the one lesson of Jewish history is that every miracle and every great thing that happened to the Jewish people had one precondition, and that was Achdut, Jewish unity. It was nothing else. It was from Har Sinai, where we stood, Ki ish echad b'lev echad, as one person with one heart, that God said, now you're ready to get the 10 Commandments, to the rescue of Russian Jews and Ethiopian Jews and Syrian Jews, when we put aside the differences and recognize that what we have in common far outweighs our differences. And when Jews are not united, every challenge is too great. Look, all of us know how Israel should be run. Everybody knows what decisions to make. Everybody knows how to do it better. The truth is, Israel's a real country. It's not Disneyland. It makes mistakes. It's sometimes Neverland, but it's not Disneyland. It's a real place with real challenges, run by real people, human beings. But we have to, I think today especially, rise above some of the tendencies that we see in the community towards divisiveness and recognize that Achdut, unity, is a value that underscores all the other things that we do, that respect for each other, to recognize that the whole is far greater than the sum of the parts, that we need each other, and that whether that is across international boundaries, and why we work closely with European communities and other communities, and why we certainly work with Israel today. Israel, I think, has responsibilities to us as we have responsibilities to Israel. But Israel's centrality, it has more than half the Jewish people of the world and will continue to grow in that disproportion, I think, is something that we all came to recognize and have to appreciate. So, to me, Israel's a source of inspiration. Israel should be a source of guidance. Israel should be a center that we all recognize, and each one defines the relationship in somewhat different ways, but not the core nature of Israel's relationship to the diaspora. For at a time when we have a Khamenei who puts a map on the internet, and he shows a map of Israel and which missiles are going to destroy which city, and then ends up by saying that we're going to wipe the Jewish people off the map, not just the state of Israel. Then we have to understand the unity of the Jewish people in facing challenges today, whether it's delegitimization, all the other challenges, and particularly at a time when we have an overriding threat. I reject the comparisons to the 30s, but I must say that the experience of the last weeks and months in dealing with Iran makes me understand the 40s. The apathy, the indifference, the lack of sense of urgency that is so apparent, and the failure to understand that when dictators say something, they mean it. They tell the truth. Leaders of democracies lie, but dictators tend to tell the truth. And we have to take what they say seriously. So this is a time, and I'm not saying you compromise principle. It's the reason why I've worked for more than 25 years at the conference, and before that in the JCRC and umbrella organizations, because I really believe deeply in Klal Yisrael. I really believe that Jews have to come together. And when you can build an atmosphere of respect, then you can deal with the differences. But today we have to show and especially educate our young, not just about the tsaros, but the victory, the joy of being a Jew. Rabbi, I think you made mention of something which I also said, and it made me think of something. How many people, how many communities celebrate the discoveries that have been made in Yerushalayim in the last few years? Unbelievable things. The little gold ball that fell off the gown of a Kohen on his way to the temple, the carving of a menorah, the first stamp with the name Bethlehem ever found at a time when everybody was denying its existence. When we see 40 countries gathering in Amman, Jordan, under ISESCO, the Islamic Society for Education, and what is their goal? At a time when you have all the turmoil, all unrest, the killings in Syria, to declare that Kever Rachel and Marat HaMachpelah and the Kotel are Muslim holy sites and not Jewish holy sites. They understand better than many of us that if you take away our past, you take away our future. That if we don't have a claim here, what right do we have to be here in the future? And this is, to me, the centrality of Israel, that no matter where you live, we all have a special connection, and we have to educate our young. For many years, we've taken them for granted. There's no material for 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds that teaches them about Israel. And it's not a political agenda. It's who they are. It's part of their identity. And if we inculcate that into them when they're young, when they get to college, they'll be prepared to meet the challenges. You can't do it when they're 20 years old and going there and meet professors and meet others and come to a climate that is hostile. We see increasingly hostile atmospheres, and therefore it's really critical for us to be able to talk honestly about the problems in Israel, but at the same time, not let that in any way denigrate the beauty, the amazement, and frankly, I see it every time through the eyes of non-Jews we bring here. It reminds me of things that I take for granted about the privilege of having a state of Israel, the miracle of the state of Israel that we dare not take for granted.
Rachel Corbus wanted to make a comment.
From my perspective, I feel the challenge is a little more complex. I think, of course, we need Israel. Israel needs to exist, and it's something extremely important. But there's something significant that's changed in the 10 years I've been involved in leadership, that I'm not convinced that the girl serving me coffee in Tel Aviv in the coffee shop really cares about the Jews in New Zealand or perhaps Mexico. I think the new Israeli, I'm not sure how they feel about their Judaism. I'm not sure if it's significant enough for them that they will have a bar mitzvah or a Jewish-style wedding. So when we talk about Israel as the centre of our life and that we need Israel and Israel needs us, what actually does that mean? And I think diaspora Jews need to ask themselves that question, because it's a lot of pressure that we're putting on the state to say we need you so desperately when perhaps a big chunk of the population doesn't really care about who we are and what we're doing. And I can see people's heads nodding.
Yes, I
so
can.
I think that's a very valid point that needs to be acknowledged. So when we're talking about engaging with Israel, identifying with Israel as part of our community, we need to empower our young leadership to be realistic about the Israel that they are going to see.
Someone could wake up the gentleman in the front row. Emmanuel Fiano, you're a politician. How do you answer this question, and how do you counter the delegitimization of Israel, for want of a better word, until we find a better word, in Italy?
Let me first say that I think that Jewish people has to participate in political life of their countries. I think we need Jewish people in the political life because I think that Jewish people has always to stand up for every struggle in favor of freedom and democracy. We have experienced what means in the history the lack of freedom and the lack of democracy, and I think that we have to bring this expertise to the political life. And let me also say that the very deep and current economical crisis which is running all over the Western world, especially in Europe, brings more dangers for the rising up of new fascist movement and new Nazist movement, as you saw and as we saw in Greece, and we saw in Austria, and as we saw in Holland, and as we saw in Belgium, and dangers of new power, new strength for the anti-Semitism, as we saw in French, which brings me to think that for the future of the Judaism, we don't have to speak only about the centrality of Israel, not only about the organization or about the open model of our institutions and communities, also about the role of the Jewish people in the common life, in the normal life. I think that we have to recognize ourselves as people always struggling in favor of freedom and democracy. And as the future of the Jewish people is not always done, it's not already done, it's in our hands. Also the future of democracy is not already done, it's in our hands. And I think I belong to a party, of course, the Democratic Party, but I think anyway we have to participate in the political life. We don't have to let the people think that we struggle and we participate in battles only in favor of our matters, of our business. This is my vision.
Thank you. I'm going to let Rabbi Jacobs make a comment and then open it up to questions from the floor.
So I want to just lift up what Malcolm said about achdut, about the sense of Jewish unity, and say something that I think will be challenging for us. And that is, to what degree is the state of Israel at this moment in time actually getting in the way of that sense of Jewish unity? Israel is at the center of my Jewish life. It is a part of who I am and the movement that I lead. But one of the most challenging things is that the state of Israel has this incredible alliance now that gives political power to the rabbinut, to the rabbinate, the ultra-Orthodox rabbinate in particular. And it's very problematic. And what Rachel said about the Jew in Tel Aviv is the Israeli in Tel Aviv, who has become disaffected, many of them, because they're not allowed to find their voice. They're not allowed to be married officially by the person that they would choose. And first of all, I believe in Jewish unity. One quick story. In our little Medina in Westchester, New York, they were putting the Eruv around a new path. So my chaver, my Orthodox rabbi, beloved friend, argued with his colleagues to include the Reform Synagogue within the Eruv. They said, why would you do that? He said, so it'd be easier for our communities to celebrate happy occasions together. Now, people say, why doesn't that happen? What is it about that sensibility? And the answer is that he does not have political power. I do not have political power. We are Jewish leaders. We base our leadership on Torah, on commitment to Am Yisrael. And we know for the sake of unity, we're willing to compromise because we must, and we take responsibility for one another. One of the greatest challenges at this moment in Israel, and the existential realities are real, they're not imagined. Israel faces enormous challenges with the BDS movement worldwide, with Iran, but it also faces an existential threat to its very soul and character, and that is something you don't hear discussed in honest and helpful ways. Here, unless we get a conversion bill that's going to send the diaspora into, a tizzy, we don't talk about it, and there are concrete ways that we could strengthen Jewish unity. I pray that all of us will work towards that, because that is a key value.
Right. We only have 15 minutes left, so I do want to open it up to questions. I ask you to identify yourself, keep your questions short, and if possible, direct them at a member of the panel. Is it possible to turn the lights on? I guess not. I can just see hands up, so is there someone with a microphone? Yes. Okay. Okay, very good. Sir, go ahead.
Yes, my name is Yehudi. I'm coming from France. I live in Jerusalem for 24 years. My question is, how is it possible to reach unity of Am Israel if you remain outside?
Anyone like to answer that? How can we maintain the unity of Am Israel with the diaspora community outside?
We've done pretty well for a few thousand years. I would just lift up the book of Esther. Not only is the diaspora potentially, an essential part, but there are times when literally the leadership of the Jewish people has come from the diaspora. We're bound together. We, by the way, don't necessarily have Jewish unity within the Jewish state. So how are we going to have it outside and inside? And I agree with you, the centrality.
Okay, all right. Again, I'm going to ask you to
Can I,
direct your
can I
question
just-
to someone. Go ahead, Malcolm.
Look, the fundamental point that the rabbi is making is right, that you, in your question, Aliyah should be seen as the highest value. There is no existence as a Jew outside and that is fulfilling, because much of our calendar, many mitzvot, are only fulfilled when you live in Israel. But that does not denigrate the ability of Jews to live outside. The Torah was not given here, it was given to show that we had a constitution before we had the state. We're the only people in the world who had that, because it is transportable in all times, and there were times when Jews lived in diaspora. The question you should ask rightly is, how do we encourage people and create circumstances that people will be attracted to come to Israel, which is the homeland of the Jewish people, and will be strengthened by the presence of all Jews here?
I think that was very nicely answered. Next question. The microphone, I believe, is there. Go ahead.
I have a microphone here.
Oh, okay. Let's start on that side then.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I have a question because you talk just a little bit about assimilation. And as many people here, I think we all know people who have a non-Jewish parent, non-mother or the father who is not Jewish. Okay, and I'm thinking right now about two categories of people. Categories of people who think that they are out of the Jewish community, and it doesn't worth it to go back to the Jewish community because they will not get anything of them. Okay, I'm thinking about these children and thinking about the gay people that think that it doesn't worth it.
Okay, I'll ask your question, sir, and please direct it.
Okay, sorry. What is your answer to this situation?
Who are you asking the question to?
To all of you, actually. What do you think you can do for these people? Because you talk a lot about including all of the Jewish people. So what you can do for them?
Okay, who would like to answer
We didn't decide the situation, of course.
Go ahead.
I think the challenge you mention is great and far and wide and very complex. And I don't believe we'll resolve that answer today in this room. However, I think a big question to ask is, what is the Jewish leadership and communities doing about that problem? And when I look around Jewish leadership in the diaspora, I see, and please take this as you will, a leadership that is aging, a leadership that is not innovative and not that creative, especially in the Zionist leadership. And maybe, as I've seen in my community, you change the style of leadership, you change the way that you behave, and you create ways for those unaffiliated people, the people that have assimilated. There are ways that you can bring them back in. And we have done many projects to bring those people back into our community, and now they're active, going on programs to Israel, coming back to Shul, coming to Yom HaZikaron, coming to Yom HaShoah, coming back to the big events that we share culturally as Jews. And if we can find and challenge the leadership within our own communities, because I believe that's the first way to challenge it back.
All right, thanks. Rabbi Jacobs just wants to make a comment.
So if I just could lift up Boston in the United States for one moment. Barry Schrage, who leads CJP, the federation in Boston, often cites that the national percentage for interfaith children who are raised in the Jewish community, in the Jewish tradition, is 30% across the country. In Boston, it is 60%. It's not the Red Sox, it's not the food, it's not the weather. They have a community-wide policy and commitment to welcome interfaith families into the Jewish community, and they are changing the Jewish future by doing so. There are concrete things for us to do, and you mentioned gay and lesbian Jews, who also, as you say, have often felt outside. There is a real opportunity for us to open those tent flaps. Emanuele said it beautifully. If we don't do that, then we're going to face the future with fear and with the demographers winning. And honestly, there's a lot we can do that we're not doing that would change the Jewish future.
All right, let's take the next question.
Thank you. My name is Sharon. I'm the CEO of Together. And I would like to talk about, to ask something that connects to what Rachel mentioned and Rick talked about. And I would like to ask Malcolm about it. Together is kind of a social network that connects Jews all around the world through hosting. When I tell people about this project, when I tell Israeli people about this project, they immediately, if they are not religious, they immediately think, okay, it's something religious. When I talk to American Jews about it, they welcome it in a different way. And it shows me the gap that you mentioned about the conception of Judaism in different places. What do you think people in the diaspora should do to change this conception inside Israel? Is there a way to change the conception of Judaism in Israel?
Malcolm. Really was.
As executive of the Conference of Presidents, I discuss religious issues. So I have a good out for it. Look, I will tell you that I do think that we need overall creativity. You mentioned before about Chabad's success in Mexico and in other places. What is it they offer that enables people who are not Orthodox? I'm coming to it. Don't preempt it. Don't step on my good punchlines. That brings non-Orthodox and certainly non-Chabad people to there. The answer is Kiddush. A good Kiddush and a good Cholent brings people, but it's also warmth and openness. Avram's tent was open on all four sides because he brought in people, and that was the prototype for Jews throughout the ages. I do think we have to have standards. I don't want to see rifts in the Jewish people that will mean that Jewish children can't marry other Jewish children, that we should have to have some way to come to some common standards that will heal the wounds and make sure that all of us can be part of Am Echad, Belev Echad, but truly Belev Echad, not second-guessing. So, as I said, I believe in the smorgasbord approach. I also believe that we can do many creative things. You know, I once went to Sharon when he was prime minister, and I said to him, I just seen a study that said that there were 750,000 or 1 million singles in the Tel Aviv area. And 3/4 of them, or more, much more in fact, said that they were looking for a spouse, but it wasn't a lifestyle choice, it was something that not just happened. In New York, we have, and in the United States, more than 1 million Jewish singles. I said to him, why don't you take an initiative and bring all the singles together? It doesn't matter what they will come from. In East Europe, I had met a group of a couple hundred Jewish singles that come together periodic, but they have such a limited choice. In Europe and elsewhere, can you imagine if we would have once a month, every Rosh Chodesh, gatherings of thousands and thousands of singles? So he said to me, but you know what? It'll lead to Yeridah. I said, so what? But you'll have Jewish families who ultimately will make Aliyah. They will come back. They will be part of the Jewish people. It's only one example, but there are things that could be done that cross all of the ideological and other lines, traditional lines, that we have to look to find creative solutions to the real challenges. And it's a question of the context in which you put it. I told Rabbi Jacobs before about an issue I discussed yesterday with the leaders of Israel about language that they use on a very sensitive issue. It's not what they do, it's how it's presented, it's how it's perceived. So many of the things, the question is how we talk to each other, what kind of language, that we often unintentionally build barriers rather than tear down barriers. And I think that creative solutions, like the World Shidduch effort, would help bring all people together and say, look, we have a common future. You're worried about the demographics? Have babies. Let's stop less meetings, more babies. We do much better.
The World Shidduch panel, that's what we're going to call this. We have time for one last question on the left.
Hi, good afternoon.
Make it a motto for
My
you.
name is Deborah Lax. I work right now for the Hallelujah Project, and I'm also affiliated with Abonin Dror. I have two questions. The first one is for Judith, and the second one will be for Rachel. As a former diaspora Jew, I was born in Peru and raised in Costa Rica. I do not feel that the Latin American community is doing anything or doing much to reach those non-affiliated Jews, or as the rabbi would call them, those non-inspired Jews. I feel the Latin communities are very closed in themselves, and it's a pity because there's a lot of they call them lost Jews, at least in Costa Rica, that would like to be affiliated. They either have one parent that's not Jewish, and then because of that, the strong Orthodox communities don't accept them. And I wanted to know if this has changed, because I made Aliyah a little bit more than 3 years ago, and I'd love to hear if it changed.
Okay.
And the other question was for Rachel. You mentioned that Israelis, you'd like to know if Israelis care, if at all, about Jewish communities in the diaspora. I feel that when I made Aliyah, all Israelis were constantly wanting to learn about me, constantly wanting to hear where I came from. What did I do all my life? Why did I make Aliyah? Why am I here all of a sudden? And I think that is proof that they want to learn more. I don't know if you are aware that there are many initiatives, you probably are, that try to connect these, the Israeli youth, at least, the ones I'm aware of, with the diaspora youth, initiatives like Masa that bring diaspora Jews to live in Israel for months, from 5 to 10 months, and that gives the Israelis the possibilities to learn about these diaspora Jews. Taglit also does that in 10 days, and initiatives like what I work with, the Hallelujah Project. It's an amazing initiative that also tries to do this connection.
All right, thanks. I think you made yourself clear. Go
Can
ahead.
I make a short example about what has to be compromise and creativity in the diaspora and what is not? What is not a compromise, it's a very famous and short joke about one Jew survivor in a small island in the Caribbean Sea, the only inhabitant, which after many years a boat came to save him and found out that he built up 2 synagogues. Why did you build up 2 synagogues? Because I want to be sure that I can be able to say that I never get in the second one. And a very good example of creativity and compromise in the diaspora. I remember in the synagogue of Stockholm in Sweden, there was a long discussion among Orthodox and non-Orthodox people. And they decided to be all together in the same synagogue. Half of the synagogue has the women on the upper side and the men on the bottom. And the other side, the left side of the synagogue, they are all together. And I think that in the diaspora, we need creativity and compromise to survive.
Thank you. I'm going to let Rachel and Judith make the final remarks, and then we'll close. Go ahead.
Thank you. Well, let me first refer to what has been here analyzed, and I would say that a shared Jewish problem today, or a shared problem that Israel and diaspora's Jewish communities face, is how diversity and pluralism became part of a normative and cultural requirement to build the Jewish collective life today. And this is a point we are facing, and we are sharing it. It's not only a matter of continuity, but also the way we guarantee expanding the understanding. Then the second is that we are aware that the normative core, the consensus that used to historically accompany Jewish life and Jewish culture and Jewish people seems to narrow. And this consensus brings us to explore and define the scope, the frontier, and who is in and who is out, right? That's what we are facing now. So it's a problem really shared, and imagination is required in almost all parts of the Jewish world. It's not only a problem of affiliated or non-affiliated Jews, because today we had a session, Emmanuel was shared with us the session, where we said, probably from the perspective of the traditional structure of the Jewish community, there are increased number of non-affiliated, but there are other ways of being Jew. All this idea of the inner self that has been so well analyzed for the states, right? By colleagues that have done really a very, very important research on that, right? How people look through new individual ways, how all these social networks, how all these social ways of communication that they are not immediately visible, but they also constitute community. And of course, for a younger generation, this is part of what it's not immediately evident. So for the Latin American Jewish life, I would say that if you take Argentina, the rates of affiliation are similar to the media in the United States. And if you take Mexico, 50-60%. If you take Mexico, you are close to 85%. Other indicators, Jewish education, it is the same. Then another indicator, exogamy. Mm-hmm. So what I would suggest is to start to analyze how there is, you are a Jew in certain conditions, in certain communal conditions, in certain societies, in certain cultures. And for me, the big, big challenge is how we really can build Jewish communal life in a world that is interacting, right?
Right. Rachel.
Thank you for your question, and I think that I haven't got the time to explain it fully, but what I want to share with you is a very, very simple point, and something I've observed over the years as well, and especially in my work in New Zealand, dealing with so many Israelis coming in. The Israelis that come into New Zealand, and this will hopefully answer your question, see themselves as Israelis. I see myself as a Jew first, and that is what I see as the key difference. When you see yourself as part of a nation, and that's your nationhood, and they're Israeli, then our starting points are very different. I see myself as a Jew first, and that is how I construct my world. So when I say that the Jew in Tel Aviv serving me coffee I really care about my community, it's because our starting points are so dramatically different. So I'm conscious of the time, but I would love to chat with you later about it.
Rachel, I would add with your
we have to. I'd like to, on behalf of all of you, thank our wonderful panelists. It's been a very interesting discussion, and look forward to seeing you all again. Thank you very much.